In this second video in the series of 4 on ALP, we're going to explain exactly what ALP is, but we'd like to start with a little background on the Community College of Baltimore County. CCBC is located in Baltimore, Maryland, on the East Coast, and in Baltimore we have 3 main campuses, one in Catonsville, one in Dundalk, and one in Essex, and 3 extension centers, one to the north in Hunt Valley, one in Owings Mills, and one in Randallstown. The college enrolls a total of 33,817 credit students, and slightly more than that in the non-credit area. The average age of our students is 29, and we have 58% female, 42% male students. Students of color make up almost exactly half of our student population, and about 2/3 of our students are part-time, 1/3 full-time. In terms of placement into developmental education, overall 81% of our students are placed into at least one developmental course. 77%, the largest percentage, are placed in math, with English placing about 65% and reading slightly fewer at 58%. The developmental math program has 3 levels, and developmental reading has 2. And developmental English has 2 levels, and it's this upper level developmental English course, English 052, that the ALP program affects and that we're going to be talking about primarily today. Of the students placed in developmental writing, 90% of them are placed in the upper level course. Only about 10% are placed in English 051. And after students successfully complete English 052, they're required to take 2 credit level English courses, English 101 and 102. So, how does ALP work? Well, a student arrives on campus and is assessed. We use the ALP2 for assessment. We're not particularly proud of that. We have grave reservations about the ALP2, but as of this date, we're still using it. And so a student is told that she or he needs developmental writing, English 052, but the student is also given another option to choose the ALP route. And if she does, then she registers for a designated ALP section of the credit English course, English 101. So there she is with her little red baseball cap on sideways. In the English 101 section, she's joined by 7 additional developmental students, and those 8 students are joined by 12 101 level students. Our class size at CCBC for all writing courses, developmental or credit, is 20. We're very fortunate in that. Now, this is one of the first ways that ALP is different from other approaches at mainstreaming developmental students into credit English. The earliest of those, as far as I know, was the Stretch program at Arizona State University, Greg Glau's program. But in that program, and in most other programs that allow developmental students to register directly for English 101, they're placed in a section that's still all developmental students. We think that our model, in which the developmental students make up half or less of the English 101 class, that model is part of the reason that our ALP program is so successful. We're fairly certain that one of the reasons so many students drop out of developmental courses in general and developmental writing is because it's so demoralizing to be placed in a developmental course. Just imagine, you're the first generation in your family to go to college, maybe the first one of your friends to go to college. You walk up to the college campus on the first day to register, and you're told, not so fast there. You're not really in college. We're going to put you in a course to get you ready for college. We're not going to give you credit for it, college credit, even though we're going to require that you pay college tuition for it. And you're going to be sort of segregated off there with other developmental students who are also weak writers. We think that's demoralizing and stigmatizing for students. We've all seen our students sort of, you know how developmental textbooks are always sort of large format books with spiral bindings? Well, my students always hide those books. They stick them in the knapsack before they leave the classroom so that when they get to the cafeteria, people won't know that they're a developmental student. Well, the ALP model works against that stigmatization, that demoralization, by not only putting students in a section of English 101, but putting them in a regular section of English 1, in which there are some students who are actually 101 level student. And a second advantage to this model, we do a lot of peer response groups and small group work in English 101, and having some, at least half the class, be made up of stronger writers, writers whose placement was directly into English 101, means that there are good, strong role models for the developmental students to sort of see how stronger writers go about writing and revising their papers, and also to see how students who are maybe a little more savvy about how to do college, how to cope with financial aid and registration and the bookstore and so forth. So we think being mainstreamed into a English 101 class in which at least half of the students are 101 level students is one of the reasons that ALP is so successful. The numbers here, these are our numbers. We use 8 and 12, but they're not magical. And in fact, as far as we know, there are only a few other schools that are able to have as small a number of students as we do, just 8. And the only real requirement from our point of view is that at least half the class be college-level students. So there's the English 101 class that our student has registered for, and there's also an instructor for that class. And in the same semester, the little red-capped developmental student registers for a section of our developmental course, English 052. But it's a special section designated for, paired with the English 101 section, and designated for ALP students. So here she is, and in this section she's joined by the same 7 students and the same instructor. We think that's really important because it means that those 8 students and that instructor will spend 6 hours a week together, half of that time in a very small class with only 8 students. We think that's sort of an idea we've stolen from the learning communities model, where a cohort of students takes a couple of classes together and they begin to get to really know each other. Developmental students, community college students in general, often feel very little attachment. They feel that their connection with the college is fairly tenuous. They get in their car in the morning and drive up, park in a parking lot, run up to class, take 2 or 3 classes, jump back in the car, go to work sometimes until late at night, fall into bed, and get up and repeat the pattern the next day. Or in some cases only do it 2 or 3 days a week. So that they frequently don't have friends at the college. Our model assures that at least these 8 students will have a close connection with each other. We find they exchange phone numbers and email addresses. They frequently register together for the next semester and try to get the same schedule. And it also means that they will have at least one faculty member that they feel close enough to ask questions when they need advice. So that's how ALP works. Now, what do we do in the little English? By the way, about the number there, again, 8 is not a magical number. Lots of other schools have used 10 or even 12. It seems to us is probably workable. We do think it needs to be a small class, but not necessarily as small as ours. So what do we do in that ALP English 052 class? Well, the instructor for the class has one goal, just to do everything possible to maximize the chance that those 8 students will succeed in English 101. In practical terms, what that amounts to is that the class is conducted as a writing workshop, supporting the students as they also take English 101. In fact, that's one of the reasons that we think, another reason that we think that ALP is so successful. In traditional developmental programs, students view the course, at least many students view the course, as an obstacle, something that's keeping them out of English 101. And often the instructor has to say to the students, please really pay attention because next semester this will really help you when you get to English 101. We never have to say that in ALP because they're in 101 concurrently with the ALP class, and it changes the whole sort of psyche of the students in the class. They no longer view the class as something that's a hurdle that all they want to do is get through it so they can get to English 101, but it's actually, because it's concurrent with 101, it's actually seen as something helpful to maximize their chances of passing English 101. So we conduct it as a writing workshop. Usually the first thing we do when we meet, and we normally schedule them with the ALP2 class meeting in the hour after the 101, although at times we do it the other way around, and some schools have actually had them on different days. But we think for us the best order is to have the class meet right after the 101 so that we can start the class by asking, are there any questions left over from the English 101 class? We do lots of writing in the ALP 052 class, mostly short papers, and we do papers that reinforce what's been discussed in the 101 class or prepare for what will be discussed in the 101 class. For example, in my 101 class, I have an assignment fairly early in the semester, 3 or 4 weeks in. This is a regular 101 full 3 or 4 page paper in which I ask students to discuss this statement: in America, if you work hard, you'll get ahead. So that assignment is coming up 3 or 4 weeks into the semester. In the second week of the ALP class, I usually ask my students to write what I call a one-pager. It doesn't have to be a full page, it can be less, it can be a little more, but a short paper in which they tell me about someone they know who worked really hard and it paid off, they got ahead. And I go over those papers and select several of them for us to talk about in the following class. And what students usually discover when we look at a couple or 3 or 4 papers the next class is that different people have very different ideas about what working hard is. Some think it means physical labor, some think it means the number of hours they work, some think it has something to do with how stressful the work is. And so it becomes clear that defining that term, if you work hard, when they're talking about someone who worked hard and got ahead, you need to discuss what you mean by the term working hard. And shortly thereafter, students discover that not everybody agrees on what the term getting ahead means. And people have very different ideas about that. And so we notice that, and we talk about that. And we talk about how, if you were writing a paper about that, you need to be clear what you mean by the term getting ahead. The following week, maybe again in class or maybe as homework, I'll have students write another short paper, a paper in which they tell me about somebody they know who worked really hard and it didn't work out for them. They didn't get ahead. And again, we'll discuss those papers. And then when the large paper is due in the 101 class, when I give them the assignment to discuss this statement, in America, if you work hard, you'll get ahead, they will have done a lot of thinking about the assignment already ahead of time. They will have thought about what working hard means. They'll have thought about what getting ahead means. They'll even have 2 concrete examples that they could use in the 101 level paper, if they choose to. That's what we mean by doing short papers that are sort of scaffolding for the 101 paper. Lots of times we discuss ideas for the next essay in 101. Since the essays are usually based on readings, this means we're discussing readings, and we can really dig in if students are having difficulty with a challenging reading and talk about it in class, in the 052 class, and clear up any individual questions that students might have. Another thing we spend a lot of time doing is reviewing drafts of essays they're working on for English 101. Now, we do work on sentence level error in the students' writing, but we have a kind of an attitude in ALP that we think that another reason that students sometimes find developmental courses so discouraging and so depressing is that sometimes they feel a lot like 4th grade. Now, we recognize that in some areas, some of our students may need material that was covered in 4th grade. But to walk into a college class and be treated like you're still in 4th grade seems to me to contribute to the dropout rate of students in developmental courses. So we try to not do that. We organize our course, we call it a top-down curriculum. That is, we look at what's required in English 101, and we say what we're going to do in developmental writing is practice the same kinds of tasks that they'll have to do in English 101, only we'll practice them with a lot more support and a lot more scaffolding. So the writing assignments in the 052 class are just as demanding as the writing assignments in the 101 class. The readings are just as challenging. We don't believe in selecting sort of simplified readings that are written at the 6th grade or the 8th grade or the 10th grade level. We give regular college level reading assignments, but then we provide support in class to talk about those readings. Finally, we talk about these last two, the items in red. That is, we talk about how to succeed as a college student and how life and about life problems that might interfere with student success. And we do that consciously. Sometimes we just do it by saying, if we have 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the class, how are things going? What's going on in your lives? And sometimes if students are having some kind of a challenging situation, they'll talk about it then. At other times, we actually have little activities designed to get students to think about some of these issues. So, for example, about a month into the semester, I have a little activity I do called Plan B. I'll ask my students, how is it going? And by this, I'll explain, I mean not just this course, but all the courses they're taking, their work schedule, their family responsibilities, any other responsibilities they have. How's the whole package going? Is it more stressful than they expected college would be, less stressful, or about what they expected? Almost universally, students find the college experience much more stressful than they had anticipated. And so I talk about that a little bit. I talk about what I've observed about how students deal with that stress. And mostly the way they deal with it is they just dig down a little deeper, work a little harder, and try to survive till the end of the semester. And sometimes that works. For some students, they are able to manage under the stress of their lives and their family responsibilities and their schoolwork. But too often, it doesn't work. Too often, they keep grinding away until finally the gears seize up and they drop out of school. And so I talk to students, I say, that might happen at some point this semester for some of you. And I'd like to do a little thinking about if you can feel that that's happening to you, if you can feel that you may not be able to make it till the end of the semester, what would be your plan B? What could you change in your life in order to survive? And it's really, I don't make the suggestions, the students make them, but I can tell you some of the things they've said. They've said, well, I could take in a roommate to help pay the rent. I could move back in with my parents and save a lot of money, but maybe some hassles, but save a lot of money. I could drop a course. One woman, I remember last semester, actually said, what you need to do, folks, is get a job like mine. I work at a nearby hospital in the evenings. I answer the phone and make appointments for patients for a group of doctors. The phone rings 3 or 4 times an hour. The rest of the time I do my homework. It's a perfect job, pays decent salary, and I stay clean and I get my homework done. So it's that kind of discussion to get them to just think about heading off the really disastrous catastrophe of having wasted a good part of a semester and a lot of money and having to drop out. So that's what we do in the ALP class. And I thought it might be useful to sort of, I've been talking along as we go about the features, the characteristics of ALP that we think contribute to its success. But I thought it might be useful to summarize those at the end of this section. So 1, students are mainstreamed into a credit level writing course. 2, the pipeline through which students have to pass is shortened by 1 semester. That is, instead of having a semester of developmental and then a semester of credit, they take the 2 of them simultaneously, so there's much less chance for students to drop out of the pipeline. We actually think the longer the pipeline, the students have to take 2 developmental courses, or in the cases of math at our school and some writing at other schools, three developmental courses. The longer that pipeline, the more chances they will give up and drop out along the way. We also think a feature that contributes to the success of ALP is that students are in a class with stronger writers in the English 101 class who can serve as role models. We also think it's important that students are members of a small cohort who spend 6 hours a week together. We think taking credit English concurrently with developmental English instead of taking them sequentially provides a meaningful context for the developmental work. The small class size allows the instructor to tailor the course to the needs of the developmental students. And we think that the ALP instructors recognize the importance of paying attention to students' affective and life issues. And finally, it's crucial in order to coordinate the two courses that the same instructor teach both the ALP course and the credit course. So that's what we think are the major features of ALP. I wanted to end by talking just for a few minutes about some other possible models. Some schools, for example, have as many as 10 students in the developmental section and maybe 22 in the comp section. Or even, at another school, there are 12 students in the developmental section and 25 in the comp section. Now, of course, the bigger the class sizes, we think you'll probably lose some of the positive effects, but not all of them. And we all live in a real world. We have to we may not have any control over class size at our school. We think the important thing is that we probably 12 students is the most that you should have in the developmental section if you want to get that small class effect of getting to know the student, getting to know their lives, getting to know their individual weaknesses and strengths. And we definitely think that you should not have the developmental students make up more than half of the English 101 class. One other model, a really creative model, that several schools, Middlesex Community College in Massachusetts and Georgia Gwinnett College in Atlanta, and Atlantic Cape Community College in New Jersey, the three schools I know of that do this. They have two sections of English 101, class size of 20, 8 developmental students in each one, and then those 8 students in those two sections feed into one developmental section of 16 students. So and the same instructor teaches all 3 sections, so those 16 students still have 6 hours a week with the same instructor. If this is a compromise that those schools reached because their college, their administration told them they could not afford a developmental section with only 8 or 10 or 12 students in it. So we're eager. We haven't seen the data yet on how this is working, but we're eager to see it and to see whether how much less success they have than the schools that are doing the smaller class size. If we find if 16 students in the class they do just as well as we do, we'll consider raising our class size. But we suspect they'll lose a little bit. But again, you have to make a compromise with the context, with the reality of the school where you're teaching. So that's the end of this videotape, and in the next videotape we'll present some data, some results of what the effects of ALP are.